need to stomp out the fire of Landkuh before it becomes an inferno. But they are too late, because we, the American player base, will not kneel. We will rise, we will march, we will reclaim our mainland and exile every last Eastern loyalist who dares breathe our own air. One continent, one people, one rule. Ah!
Despite the shaky peace, tension simmered across the mainland. The Great Imperium, now the most powerful force on the continent, found itself surrounded by growing instability. New banners began to rise in the distance, signaling the birth of new nations. Among the new nations, the Republic of Gonzales emerged. Founded by H.J. Pisa and his followers, they focused on building grand structures, staying neutral in the conflict, and avoiding the power struggles that threatened the older nations. But not all was peaceful. The Kingdom of Legio was founded by King of Goons, a former exile of the Great Imperium's purges. Legio sought not only to build, but to one day liberate Irkutov from Irkagiga's iron grip. Recognizing the rising threat, Irkagiga proposed the creation of the Central States Alliance, a political maneuver designed to present a united front. The alliance was meant to deter aggression, but it was clear. These nations, though united in name, were far from united in purpose. The alliance, though officially signed, quickly descended into irrelevance. Each nation pursued its own interests, with leaders prioritizing their individual goals over the collective unity. Rhodessa, once a neutral party, began militarizing in an attempt to keep up with the rising tensions. However, its leadership proved weak and disorganized, and the nation eventually collapsed. Its citizens scattered, leaving only a shell of what it once was. Meanwhile, the Republic of Gonzales, mocked for its name and purpose, rebranded itself as the Reagan Republic, seeking new prestige and legitimacy on the mainland. Despite the mockery, it continued to grow, gaining favor in trade circles. As Rhodessa fell into memory, a new nation, Hibernia, arose. Founded by Irish players, they focused on agriculture, shifting the region's crop production from wheat to potatoes. The land, once farmed by Rhodessa, now became a symbol of new beginnings. While the mainland remained relatively peaceful for the time being, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The ideologies, ambitions, and growing nationalist sentiments would soon divide the continent once again. The annexation of the western Coupage by the Great Imperium sent shockwaves through the mainland. What had been a neutral and largely stable region was now swallowed up by the Imperium, throwing the balance of power into chaos. Avalon, who had long maintained neutrality, now found themselves on edge, as their own territory seemed threatened by the new, increasingly dominant force in the mainland. The Avalon Kingdom, once neutral, now faced a decision. Should they continue to hold their ground, or would they need to shift alliances to preserve their sovereignty? Tensions grew as Avalon leadership led by Arczyne debated their next move. With the Imperium growing ever stronger, something had to change. Irkagiga, now in control of the Imperium and its territories, was aware of the growing instability. The annexation had been successful, but it had created unforeseen tensions. Avalon, no longer a passive observer, now stood in the way of Imperium's future ambitions. The Avalon Kingdom, driven by a mix of fear and resentment, would not bow to the Imperium. They had their own vision, one that would see them expand and fortify their position. And in the shifting tides of power, Avalon's neutrality was no longer tenable. A split was inevitable. Thus, the Avalon-Emperium Split marked the beginning of a new era in the mainland, one of shifting alliances, unspoken rivalries, and a balance of power that would forever remain in flux. In the aftermath of mounting tensions in the mainland, a new nation emerged under a bold new vision. Landkuh, founded by Admitted Meat, was more than just a political project. It was a reaction to a deeply entrenched racial hierarchy that had formed across the continent. In the mainland's unspoken social structure, Americans were pushed to the margins, while Eastern Europeans dominated cultural and political spheres. Admitted Meat, a staunch anti-laborist, rejected this order entirely. He believed every nation should be built upon its own national identity, and for Landkuh, that meant placing American nationality at the top, not out of hatred, but out of pride in their numbers, their culture, and their shared struggle. Driven by this vision, a wave of American players left the old powers behind, seeking a new home in Landkuh. They were not just citizens, they were building something their own, from the ground up. The other mainland nations looked upon Landkuh with discomfort and suspicion, unsettled by its sharp rhetoric and fast-growing population. But Admitted Meat made no secret of his intentions. Landkuh's goal was domination, to seize control of the mainland and purge it of Eastern European oppressors who had long held power. Landkuh's formation wasn't just political, it was personal. It stood as a defiant answer to the established order of the mainland, and it was only the beginning. As Landkuh's nationalist agenda took root and its anti-laborist stance grew louder, fear began to spread among the other powers of the mainland. Concerned about Admitted Meat's ambitions and the growing militarization of Landkuh, the Great Imperium, Hibernia, and the Reagan Republic took a decisive step. They formed the Mainland Powers Alliance, an agreement to defend one another against external threats, particularly those coming from Landkuh. This alliance wasn't built on friendship. It was built on necessity. While their ideologies differed, the members of the alliance understood one thing. If Landkuh's expansion wasn't checked, the balance of power in the mainland would collapse. The stage was now set. As Landkuh's hardened its rhetoric, the mainland powers prepared to respond. Not for war, but to ensure that if Landkuh ever tried anything, they would be ready. Fueled by resentment against the Great Imperium's dominance and a desire to assert American dominance, Landkuh called for a Western coalition to resist the looming threat. Avalon, still bitter over the Avalon Coast War and its rivalry with Pixelized Chicken, saw an opportunity to strike back politically. They joined quickly. Western Medicae hesitated. Surrounded and outmatched, they faced a simple reality: join the alliance or risk isolation. Their entry was not ideological, it was survival. Here, the Northern Organization of the Western Alliance was born, known as NOAA. It stood directly against the growing threat of the Great Imperium. This was not an alliance of trust, it was an alliance of necessity. And as tensions climbed, the Western Bloc made it clear: any further expansion from the Great Imperium would not go unchallenged. The West had drawn its line. After weeks of strained relations, Avalon and the Great Imperium began to move toward a more pragmatic alliance. The deal was simple, yet profound. The Great Imperium offered Avalon its coastal lands back in exchange for a large supply of diamonds, an offer Avalon could not refuse. Though the coast had once been part of Avalon's dominion, the Great Imperium saw its value not in the land, but in the diamonds that lay beneath it. The trade brought them a wealth of resources, and Avalon, in turn, regained an important strategic location. This transaction marked the beginning of a slow repair in relations between the two powers. Once divided by distrust and competition, Avalon and the Great Imperium now found themselves with a common interest: stability, resources, and the shared goal of securing their positions on the mainland. In the wake of this newfound alliance, Avalon, cautious but determined, shared crucial information. They warned the Great Imperium about Landkuh's plans: a radical agenda to exile all Eastern European players from the mainland, an idea that threatened to destabilize the region. The Great Imperium, ever cautious of such an upheaval, began preparing. The information from Avalon set the wheels in motion. Weapons were produced in vast quantities, and industry began to mobilize as the threat of conflict loomed on the horizon. As the Great Imperium's industry geared up, Avalon and the Imperium worked together to secure their interests, knowing that Landkuh's ambitions could spark an inevitable conflict. The foundations were being laid for what would become a critical turning point in the mainland's history. Meanwhile, Landkuh, ever vigilant, began to suspect Avalon's true intentions. Their leadership watched the growing connection between Avalon and the Great Imperium closely, though they could not uncover the full extent of their newly repaired relationship. Paranoia grew in the halls of Landkuh's government, but they remained unaware of the extent to which Avalon and the Great Imperium were cooperating in secret.
Thanks for watching the entire video. I am very excited for the next video. It's going to be about the Mainland War, which is one of the most influential wars in the server. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that, because I'll be putting a lot of effort into that. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters, and my #1 Patreon supporter, Twinkie. Thank you, Twinkie. Thank you, thank you. All of this is done without you. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and etc. Please support the server. Discord server is in the description for the actual server, the Imperiya micro server. And yeah, join the Patreon to help support the server and support the videos. I'm trying to produce them good and well, so yeah, thank you.